Today, I'm going to be talking about rhythm of practice. And I get this from this unified mindfulness course that I took about a year ago. And what we're going to be doing is talking about how to think of the practice and come at it. Because if we kind of have a mental organization for it, it's easier to do the practice in a kind of balanced way. So, okay, great. So, firstly, so four basic pillars of practice are life practice. So that's like practice in daily life, which means both formal practice in daily life and also informal, like practice, just throughout your day. So that's pillar one. Pillar two is retreat practice. I don't know how many of you on this call have done retreat, but I strongly recommend retreat. It really changes things. And I'd also like to say about retreat practice, retreat practice is actually different than at-home formal practice. It's not just more of it. And actually, at-home practice is also different from, I'm just saying the same thing, but it's different from retreat practice. It's not just less of it. It's a more integrating way to practice. Whereas the retreat practice is a more kind of concentrated, like intense formal practice. And then I'll say that there are benefits of practice that can only be achieved on retreat, and there are also types of practice the benefits of practice that can only be achieved through formal seated practice in your daily life or even informal practice. So I just want to kind of say that and kind of encourage a fair and balanced way of looking at all of them. All of them are good, and it's not that one is better than the other. They're just different. Although I will say that, retreat practice is really incredible for deepening quickly. Okay, good. Let's see here. Another aspect of practice, and this is according to Shinzen Young, is giving support and getting support. So here in this class, you've been getting support, you've been getting teaching, but I think that it's good. I do actually think it's good to teach whatever you learn. So if you have someone you can teach this information to, maybe you've taken some notes, or maybe you can rewatch the YouTube videos, whatever. Teach it to somebody else. Or, and to be clear, this doesn't apply to what I've taught you. This applies to any kind of spiritual practice that you've done. Go teach it to someone. It's a very good way to actively engage with the practice. Okay. And then, keep getting getting support. And, getting support, I think of largely as, so doing like a course like this, that would count. Going and meditating in groups, getting spiritual friends, people that share your interest in meditation, but even like psychology. If you're interested in psychology and you have somebody you talk about psychology, that's a form of cultivation and spiritual practice in my mind. So, and then what else? Also reading, listening to Dharma talks, all of that is good. Also yoga. Yoga is very, very good. Okay. Let's see here. So let's briefly just go over all the techniques that we covered. So we covered loving kindness, metta. And let me say that, in my opinion, and this is quite important, the heart practices should be your go-to. I would make heart practices 50% of the practice, and whenever you're having difficulty with your insight practices, always go back to your heart practices. So in this case, loving kindness, metta, or tonglen. The second week, we did see, hear, feel. Right, so that's a vipassana technique. So that's insight. And that's also very helpful for mentalizing and building the skills of mentalization, of knowing your own experience as a mind, knowing the minds of others, and being able to maneuver all of that fluently. Also, we did sympathetic joy. So that's another heart practice. I think sympathetic joy is a fantastic practice. I think I mentioned this in our class, but sympathetic joy, of all the practices that I've ever done, was the one that made the most obvious difference immediately. Like the next day after having done sympathetic joy or mudita practice, I noticed, wow, I can actually be happy for the accomplishments of others and not feel threatened by them. Okay, good. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier, we did Tonglen, then which is this, giving and taking, which is mostly a compassion practice. We talked about all the benefits, and also I think I mentioned some of the benefits around healing attachment conditioning around Tonglen, like how by attuning to all beings and their suffering, you're working on the factor of secure attachment of attunement, and then wanting to soothe all beings, you're working on that factor of secure attachment soothing, right? And then to step back, mudita works on this express delight quality of secure attachment conditioning. Okay, good. Then the next practice that we covered was essence noting. Essence noting is, of course, noting just like see, hear, feel, but it kind of has a more Mahamudra type orientation, which is all about open, spacious awareness. And so, we would listen for the ships in the harbor and listen for the sound that could not be heard to come into that open presence. And then, of course, last week, like we mentioned, we did the attunement meditation, which is a way to work through our triggers. And also, we did the more Vipassana version of, or insight version of just seeing our triggers arise as they are and then pass away, and see them as just simply activation of the visual field, internal visual field, or internal auditory field, or emotional field, or somatic field, right? And we see how they would kind of come together and then they would pass away. And by seeing that, there's insight, and it helps us kind of stay calm with the difficulty of life, develop equanimity. Good. So then that's kind of a review of the course. So let's see here. Let me just say this, so you've been given a lot of different practices, and that's good. It's probably, in a sense, too many practices that you're exposed to. But what you want to do is you want to just make the most of any of them and do practices that make sense for you. It's fine if you just do one or two of these and you never come back to the other. It's fine. And I think there's many benefits to all of them. I can't really say, oh, there's one that's better than the other. There's some practices I like a little bit better. I like Tonglen a lot. I think essence noting is really good. And I also think these trigger practices are also fantastic. But what you want to do is you want to own your own practice and practice in a way that works for you, because there's no benefit in doing practices that don't work. So there you go. Now, the thought, I would recommend continuing with 30 minutes a day. That's a really strong basis. Of course, doing more is good, but I would recommend that. Also, I would recommend, like I said, keeping up with getting teaching, giving teaching, and also see if you can do the daily life micro hits, the informal practice, and also the retreats. I would strongly recommend all of that. Okay, good. Basically that's it for the lecture. Well, let me look here. Yep, that's all I've got. So are there any questions about what's been said so far?
I have a question.
Sure.
About the retreats.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now retreats are difficult for some reasons. What I did last summer was to do a retreat at home.
Yeah.
Where basically I was alone during 1 week, and I spent this week to do some meditation, like 4 hours of meditation every day, and try to stay silent all the time and take care of the flat, etc. Like chores as a practice also. I guess it's less good than a formal retreat, but how can you compare that? Is that something comparable here?
It's a great question. And actually, I legitimately find this very interesting. So in a certain way, I kind of view the two types of retreat that you mentioned, that not one is not necessarily better than the other, but they're different, and they help with different aspects of the practice. If you're on like a really strict Vipassana or really strict Zen retreat, it's going to be kind of more concentrated, just formal practice all day long, right? Especially the Vipassana retreats. And that's really good. But then I would say that the retreats where you maybe only practice 4 hours of formal practice, but you have a lot of silence, you're doing your chores mindfully, I think there's a lot of benefit to that. And I really don't think that that's necessarily less beneficial than the true formal residential retreat. It's just different, and it's going to be more integrative. Now, what I would say is this: I would actually recommend doing both. Doing the formal residential retreats that are very focused, and then also doing kind of like lighter retreats. And let me tell you a little anecdote. I was living in Dallas, Texas, and I was having a very stressful time. I was dealing with a business that was in the process of failing. And I went out and volunteered for 3 days at a Goenka Vipassana retreat center. And so I think we did, 4 to 5 hours of formal practice and maybe four hours of work or something like that. And then I really tried to lean into like the generosity and the service and trying to do my work well and in a kind of formal and orderly manner. And like that was one of the retreats when I left it. It seems like I really noticed a difference. Like I noticed like a permanent shift. And then like I also noticed how like my ability to do work at home was permanently upgraded. Like I was just more present. And so that was like actually one of the most powerful retreats I ever did. And it was just my volunteering and working. Did that speak to your question, Julian?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Sure. And like, let me just make another comment that in my mind, it's all about just taking advantage of what's coming up, right? And just being kind of like being responsive. It's like right now we're all kind of on retreat, right? And so you make the best of the coronavirus retreat that you got. You just keep doing the best with it. Also, I think Julian, I mentioned this to you when you and I were talking once. I used to live in Miami, and I would go and walk up to a 24-hour chapel where I could like sit and sit, in kind of like this adoration room with, Jesus and Mary statues and stuff in the pews. It was fantastic. I would often do like a 1 day retreat, like once a month, in addition to other stuff. But so I just like slip that in informally, like on a weekend, and that was great. So anyway. Anything else coming up for people?
Well, I have other stuff.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's about the 30-minute stuff. I just wanted to say something about that.
Uh-huh.
I personally noticed that the 30-minute mark is interesting.
Uh-huh.
I usually meditate longer than 30 minutes. I do more like 1 hour sessions. And the first 30 minutes are the most chaotic in this
Definitely.
60 minutes. So I would definitely advise everybody to do more than 30 minutes because the last 30 minutes are way better. That's it.
No, that's good. Yeah. Also, I think that there's something about like a 45-minute sit, because like the last 15 are going to be way more absorbed, and then an hour is great as well. And then I'll just throw this out there. I mean, like, to be clear, I kind of have just about dedicated my life to all this. So I've, at times practiced quite a lot, but my primary teacher, Abra, would say there's something special also about the 2-hour mark. If you can meditate 2 hours a day, you're gonna progress, and things are gonna change for you quickly. And then also, let me say this, that every month you should see basically a permanent upgrade in your quality of life. And if you don't, you're doing something wrong. And there are some people that should be able to see it every week. But I mean, you have to meditate a lot for that, and then your conditions have to be good. But every month, if you're meditating, let's say 30 minutes an hour a day, you should expect an improvement. And then I can honestly tell you, to just further encourage retreat, every single retreat permanently changes your life for the better. That's my experience. Like, if you do even a 3-day retreat, maybe even a 1-day. I mean, I think a 1-day you're not going to be able to tell necessarily, but if you do a 10-day retreat, you likely will be able to tell my life is permanently better as a result of this. But I mean, again, I'm kind of a fanatic, so take that with a grain of salt.
Cedric, I have a question for you on that then.
Yeah.
What criteria are you referring to say my life is substantially better or it's increasing for you?
How was it for me when I noticed the changes? Okay. Okay. So I got to go on memory, and memory is notorious crap for everybody, right?
So how about you just make something up then on the spot?
Well, that's what I'm going to be doing, Kurt, of course.
Okay.
At least I'll try to believe the lies I'm telling you. How about that?
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Great. No. Okay. Geez. Okay. So I started meditating very seriously. I started meditating 15 years ago, but then I became very dedicated 9 years ago. I was extremely depressed, extremely anxious, to a point where I literally could not cope with my life. Like, literally, I could not cope. And I knew that I would need to either kill myself or get very serious about changing things. And I mean that. So, okay. I noticed that there was I quickly noticed that there was less tension in the body. I noticed that I had a presence of mind where I could understand what's happening in my experience. It's just basically mentalization, like metacognitive introspective awareness. I just saw what was going on. I could understand others better. There was actually a bandwidth and an availability. This is something that kind of has happened over the years. My appreciation for nature has completely changed. Also, my appreciation for beauty has changed. But that's something that kind of has happened very slowly, but progressively over the years. But I'm going to mainly focus on the earlier years because I think that that's what's more relevant. Also, there was just a more interest. There was a maturation around ethics. I was always interested in ethics, but I think that just having this kind of basically Buddhist framework and then helped with developing ethics. And also, I think that there was a constant, bhavana was a thing for me. And so bhavana means development, bhavana. It actually shares etymology with becoming. So bhavana became more of an explicit thing in my life. So I knew what it was to develop ethics, to develop listening skills, to develop my handwriting, even though I've never done that. But something like that, right? And so that skill, that meta skill of bhavana, kind of came into place. My ability to reframe things and kind of interface with things in a positive way, where I can learn something from this, and that happened. My ability to feel compassion completely and utterly changed. Totally. I could feel some compassion prior to serious practice, but practice really changed my access to compassion. And I can also say for myself personally, that has really, really diminished my suffering and brought a lot of joy just to know what compassion actually is. There's a lot less physical pain in the body. I used to get, I just felt kind of creakier or something. Also, sleep did become better. I could handle long trips. I used to get sick if I was in the car for more than 3 or 4 hours. I was constantly stressed. If I would get like 6 or 7 hours of sleep a night instead of my 9 that I needed, I would get physically ill where I would throw up. Like literally, I'd get physically ill because I was like not well when I got into the practice, but that's totally gone now. What else? Like 10 times more patient. Way more patient. Also, hugely diminished number of thoughts. This might sound unbelievable, but I probably have 2 or 3% as many thoughts as I used to. Seriously. Oh yeah. Thinking, just as like often is just total. It's just all silence. Better ease with others. Although I will say that I think there have been times when I did too much retreat and I was not interacting much with others that actually, at least retreat practice, made it harder to connect with others, but that got corrected. Let me see if I can think of anything else. Fewer bowel problems. I used to have more bowel problems and those are gone. That's all I can think of right now.
All right, I only put down about 20, so you
yeah.
yeah. No, thanks for that. Because you threw out a couple of times how life, is better, and how you benefited from it, and obviously built into many of the practices that I've learned over the past 8 weeks are benefits immediately. So you can say, the benefit of this is that. I just wanted to get what you were referring to and have you just codify it for me that way. Thanks.
Sure.
And I can relate to many of them.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm seriously interested. So over this last 8 or 9 weeks, what are the changes that you've seen in your life from just from meditating a little bit more than you otherwise had?
Well, I think I was on the path of certainly the essence noting, but this just, and as I mentioned it to you when that one first came up, it just blew up for me like, oh yeah, I get it. I can make this a practice. It's not just an aha or a momentary, oh, that's what I just thought.
Yeah.
So for me, being able to put that into practice, and also my willingness to share it with other people. Even though I am a teacher, this is not what I teach.
Sure.
And usually when I teach, it's because I feel I've studied, I've experienced, I've gathered enough. But for me to share this was instantaneous, and I have many friends who are in and out of meditation. So I think the other thing this has done for me is also the commitment to wanting to reap the benefits of meditation.
Oh, sure.
Which is then having me be more committed to meditating, because I've done lots of different starts and stops in my life, as I'm sure you can understand. Sure. But I think this course, which had again the support of you and the others in the course, and reminding me why we're doing this, and giving us, at least for me, moral, if not procedural support.
Sure.
Just help that benefit as well, so that it's easier for me not to have to go into a formal meditation, but I can pull up a number of different meditations throughout the day. Where before I might struggle with what am I doing with this thought or this emotion, or why am I having this feeling? Now it's, let me check into it, let me process it, and I get where it's coming from and I can release it.
Sure.
So on those levels, it's I'm going to say a faster recovery. I'm sure that means something to some people.
Sure.
So those are some of the values I've gotten from the past 8 weeks. And there are some things, like the triggers that I just haven't looked at in practice yet. But I don't feel guilty about it. I have some things that are working, and I'll use the things that I know I'm getting value from.
That's right. You should just take what you got and don't worry about the rest. I mean, and literally these talks are actually on YouTube, so you can go back and revisit them. And there's lots of other good teachers out there as well. So
that's the other thing, by the way. Thanks for that. I have gone out and done extra research, whether it be on some of the words or concepts that you use, and found, as some people have mentioned here, some other practices on there as well. So it's opened up that for me as well. So I think, you know, in some ways, the meditation has expanded my willingness and desire to go in and understand self. So that's not that it's not what I haven't been doing all my life. I just think it's a more cohesive process at this time in my life to work with.
Yeah, that makes sense, Kurt. And then, you know, something I wanted that you mentioned that I want to like highlight and kind of double down on, which is you have to see the benefits in your own life, and then you take motivation from that. Like here in the West, none of us are going to do meditation because I tell you, or because somebody else tells you. It's just not going to happen. It's got to be voluntary. You got to want to do it, and you got to see the benefits yourself. And so something I love to remind people of is like, you know, ask yourself, how can I enjoy this more? How can I take joy from this? And then also so that's good. The joy is a benefit, but also be explicit about the benefits that you see. Like, oh my God, I'm so much more patient. Like, I know I would have said something shitty to this person, but no, I let it go. Like, awesome. You know, and then like think, this is because I'm meditating. This is because of my spiritual practice. And like drill it into your head so that you derive the motivation to do the practice. Because, and this is another thing I like to say, I don't think I've said it in this class yet, but like the benefits to meditation are like this, right? And they increase over time. And then the motivation to practice is like this. It increases just barely over time. And I like to think that there's a 1 to 10 ratio between benefits and motivation. Like the benefits are absolutely insane. And then the motivation is like, yeah, I should, yeah. Anyway, so, all right.
I don't understand exactly that this lack of motivation for the meditation. That's an interesting subject, I think. I don't know. Why is that so difficult for people to do it? Okay. Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I have an idea.
Because there is so many people that I try to put to meditation and they don't do it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I have an opinion. Okay, and this is just an opinion. So the actual survival and reproduction benefits of meditation are pretty low, whereas the survival and reproduction benefits of actually all the hindrances, you know, greed, hatred, delusion, doubt, restlessness, blah, 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 are really high, you know? And then now here, I'm going to come at it a different way. And these are just ideas. I'm not saying any of this is the truth, but your genes, you know, like your genetic material does not give a shit if you're happy or peaceful. It doesn't care. They want to reproduce. That's what they do. That's their job. And they're somewhat, this is just one way of looking at it, they're somewhat indifferent about your happiness. And so what you're doing in meditation is becoming happier and peaceful and wiser, which really doesn't increase your survival and reproduction value very much. So it's kind of a distraction to survival and reproduction.
That's a very, very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Because I have the feeling that most of the suffering that we can have are related to survival issues.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, you know, yeah. And then, okay, Ken McLeod, I think I've talked a few times about Ken McLeod. One thing he talks about how he does not think that, he doesn't think that that a mindful society is even possible. Because actually, if everybody's mindful and meditating all the time, they might actually just quit their jobs and quit making babies, and everything would probably collapse. And so on some level, I mean, lots of people, there's this kind of like liberal modernism and like, oh, everything's going to be great, and I don't find that compelling. And like, oh, we're gonna make the world mindful, get everybody meditating. I mean, I want to put this out there, and it's very good for people if they do, but I'm not on some sort of quest to make society mindful or make everybody meditators. It would probably ruin everything.
Let's say that would be a good way to ruin everything.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.